Hello. I started this stream, and here you can see webcam for new viewers. I started this stream, and I suddenly felt, okay, I don't get anxiety attacks. Some people may know I have had quite a bit of issues with anxiety and depression in my time, but I occasionally get these kinds of, I would identify it as, you start becoming self-aware almost. There's like a feeling of, you become aware that you're just this pile of flesh and bone and blood in this moment in time, and it's this feeling of being able to think of nothing but just that. So I started streaming, had a fun little introduction about, here's my webcam and the hassle and pain I've had to go through to get it to work. It's not a webcam, it's just my phone that I've hacked. Well, I've used the software that will allow me to just switch over here to my face here, to my face cam, and just enlarge so I can talk to you all. Hello. Yeah. There's this thing, right, with anxiety that can often happen when you're feeling anxiety, where panic attacks are one thing, and I've experienced panic attacks in my time. It's not very pleasant, as you might imagine. Panic attacks, though, feel like they're taking over very much your whole body, and it's a feeling of, it feels like you're dangling off a cliff. But occasionally you have, as I have, because I don't have really, I have had panic attacks, but not that often. I tend to have anxiety that's more like, there's a feeling of, as I said, becoming suddenly self-aware of just how ridiculous it all is. Just how here you are, this weird little creature, just trying to accomplish something. How are you supposed to accomplish something when you're just so bad at everything? And that's the sort of thing that also oftentimes comes to fuel depression and those feelings of, when you're depressed, you can often feel this torrent of self-abuse coming in, where you end up thinking of yourself as just the most hideous, devious, awfulest person around. And of course it doesn't really make sense, because I'm not that bad. Trust me. Here I am in the darkness because the sun has set, so I figured that's fine. It's a little bit moody. I like that. But I'm not a bad person, and I don't think anyone accuses me of being bad either, but you can just get to this point where you just start feeling like you're just losing touch with not reality so much as losing touch with the presence. But I don't want to get this stream off to some sort of overly negative start talking about mental illness. It's just that I started the stream some half hour ago, and then I just felt like, oh, no, I need to restart this, I need to restart this. And I started thinking, well, no, I've already started the stream, it's just fine, it's just how it is. But then I started thinking, oh, people are gonna watch the start, how I bungled up the start, and I'm gonna have to think about that. That's one of the things you always do when you have anxiety of various sorts. You always end up thinking about your mistakes so much that it becomes, that it's the narcissism aspect of anxiety that a lot of people don't necessarily, a lot of people aren't aware of. And because oftentimes with anxiety, you're so concerned about, you always end up thinking that if other people knew about these mistakes I do, they will be disgusted. It will be like the biggest thing in their life for that moment. They will become so disturbed about how just vile and wicked you are. And why the fact that I made a technical error here or there when I was streaming, is that going to be enough to, you know, get people to feel sickened with me? It's not as if have murdered someone or heated away the corpse. But there's something that's kind of what narcissistic element is of depression, and why to me it always helped when I started thinking along the lines of, you know, no one cares. A lot of anxiety I dealt with was social anxiety and stepping outside, being seen outside, and my appearance, which, you know, here I am streaming my face. Hello, this is what I look like. I don't necessarily like, it's not the same, it's not quite the same as like thinking you're not attractive or thinking you're ugly, whatever. It's just becoming so kind of beginning to overanalyze your physical appearance, and specific to me it was a lot about how I just move, how I just gesture, how I look at people, how I operate. And you become so overwhelmed, it's like overheating. That's basically what a lot of anxiety is, especially for me as someone who has I don't have these spikes of anxiety, I just have kind of constant whirring, buzzing of anxiety. And a lot of that comes down to when it gets too much, it feels like you're overheating, like a machine overheats. And you just, after a while, just need to shut off and get to a quiet, calm place. And it's also so weird, especially when you're someone who is fond of self-expression, of putting yourself out there. Because on one hand, when you feel overwhelmingly anxious and you need to, you know, shut it off and do a reboot, you still feel like you need to get out there again, because that's also where you feel less anxious. I feel less anxious when I'm not doing stuff to, you know, share with people. A cartoon, or now is going to be a stream, and that can obviously become very self-destructive. I know many people online do work as a way to settle some of their anxiety. They put stuff out there, many content producers online. That's how they go about it. They make stuff in order to feel less anxious about other things. Certainly I'm worried about some of the people on Twitch streaming for, you know, several thousands of hours every day, and I didn't even know that there were that many hours in a day, but they managed to make it somehow. And I know for some streamers it's just about making money, because they know that anytime they're not streaming, they're not making money. But I think that Twitch may be responsible, not to put it too dramatically, but there might be a bit of like, does Twitch hold some responsibility for those people who are really putting themselves out there almost to the point of exhaustion, and dying, not dying necessarily, but, you know, walking into the wall of big old stress, big old nervous breakdown, because they're streaming all the time. I sort of started talking about this instead of playing the game, which I feel like this. You know what? I have my webcam here. Why don't we do? I was about to play Thimbleweed Park, and it's not a game I'm going to continue playing, but I guess because I suddenly felt like this spike of some anxiety, maybe we should just not play Thimbleweed Park and just have a moment of just talking about anxiety, talking about let's do sort of questions, Q&A with Fred. Let's do a mental health special of Q&A with Fred. Can we find some questions about mental health? 10 answers to your biggest mental health questions, 72 mental health questions for counselors and patients. This is from positivepsychology.com, which this might be a rubbish website, so I'm not going to endorse it, but this could be interesting. So I'm going to write on Twitter. I was going to play Thimbleweed Park, but because of a sudden bout of some nonsense, some mental health nonsense, some mental nonsense in my brain hole, we're now instead talking mental health, because why the fudge not? Let's just improvise. I'm gonna switch to there we go, home Twitter. No, wait, actually I'm gonna move this Chrome page, and then we're going to capture that Chrome page, and then we're gonna switch to talk Q&A with Fred, mental health edition. Let's talk about those things no one really wants to talk about. Just chatting. I don't like the word chatting, but that's the category on Twitch. Just chatting, not just talking, just chatting. But here we go, and edit layout. We're going to minimize our face a little bit now, not too much. It's just going to be minimized like this. And see here, okay, suddenly we are a lot brighter, because the screen is suddenly a lot brighter. Let's see here. 72 mental health questions for counselors and patients by Catherine Moore, psychologist, MBA. So this might actually be decent. It's good to talk about, because I know so many people. And for those who don't know, a lot of time on the Twitters, I like to make these occasional threads about mental health, and it's always very well appreciated by people, I feel. And my background, I should note that it's not as if I have a background when it comes to mental health, really. It's just that I have, well, my background is... Can I just move the window a little bit? Yeah, this looks actually quite nice. And can I zoom in a little bit to get text bigger? Here, you can read it all now, right? And my face cam doesn't cover it. Oh, this is actually really good. Look at that. We managed to look like a professional streamer. But we are going to be chatting instead of playing one of those games. No Fortnite here. I'm sorry. No Fortnite. Instead we're going to go all depressed and talk about our feelings and emotions. So a little bit of background to me. I have... I'm gonna remove my headphones, actually. I don't need to have them on. Do you want to see my hair, by the way? Why not? Let's go full on hippie. So my background, I have had issues, let's just say, with mental health since I was a kid. It's one of those funny things where I know that I had a positive, good childhood, but ever since I was a child, I remember feeling, for no good reason, excessive feelings of guilt and shame, without no reason. It's not as if I grew up in a cult, a hardcore cult that tried to make me feel like I was lesser, or should have some things to tell the elders of the cult to explain my guilt and how bad of a person I am. Some reason I don't know exactly, because I haven't had expensive brain scans done on my brain, but I'm pretty positive that something happened during my development that caused certain areas of my brain to become too strong. Basically all those areas that deal with anxiety and feelings of otherness to become basically hyper-powered, made extra strong. So throughout my childhood was mostly okay though. I could handle most of that weirdness just as a child. As a teenager, I had a miserable time, as I'm sure many of you have had miserable times as teenagers. I mean, I'm very skeptical and dubious of people who enjoy their childhood and teenagehood, adolescence, and it's one of those things that I know a lot of people feel the same, talking about, oh, you actually liked being a teenager? What sort of bizarre fucker are you? How can you enjoy that mess? I went out to party and I had all the boys and the girls there. We were all kissing each other and having a lovely old time. And I was like, I was at home in bed crying. I mean, there was a point as a teenager when I was routinely forcing myself by drudging up, negative feelings every night, drudging up feelings so I could cry before I went to bed every night. And that was a long period for me as a teenager. And it's clear to me, retrospect, that during this time I was clinically depressed. I was seriously depressed, but I never got some sort of real diagnosis of depression as a teenager, and partly because of myself, I wasn't really aware that there was anything, there could be anything wrong with me. I was, like many teenagers, kind of obsessed with the idea that I am just not meant to be alive. But I think that there was, I remember going to some psychiatrist that should have probably been able to tell that no, this kid is seriously depressed right now and probably should take care of that, but they didn't. The one thing you realize very early on when you're talking about mental health and talking about other people with mental health issues is that everyone has some instance of talking with someone who should not be a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist or a counselor or anything like that. They're just, you have no idea what you're doing, alright? You get that feeling of, right, how did you manage to get your degree? Because you are so lacking in touch with people. But I will say that I have had much better interactions with, much more positive interactions with psychiatrists and psychologists than negative ones. And that's the thing. It's so hard to say this to some people who are like seriously struggling with mental health, and to the point where they're feeling just entirely shut in. It can be so difficult to tell them at that moment, no, you gotta get yourself out there, you gotta find a psychiatrist, especially in some countries where the infrastructure isn't there, or some countries where you have to pay a lot of money, cash in order to get it. I mean, it's not this, you have to pay some money for it in Sweden, but eventually if you pay too much you basically will get it for free. That's how it works in Sweden, and it's not that expensive. Also, it's just, especially if you end up really needing it, you won't have any problems getting it. But it can be, obviously, if you are, seriously gripped by a lot of depression, anxiety, all those miserable feelings, the last thing you will want to do is get out of bed. So, obviously, saying to them that, hey, you should just get out there, and you may at one point had a really bad experience with some psychiatrist who really didn't get you or do good for you, but you will find someone who is better, and that doesn't always sound very appealing if you're in that situation, but it is important. If you have issues with mental health, it's your responsibility to seek improvement, seek professional help. And it's very easy to sort of sound, when you're talking with people who have mental health issues, it's very easy to sort of talk to them, coddle them a little bit, having your kid gloves on. But speaking as someone who have had, severe mental health issues, suicidal thoughts and the likes, keep having significant issues. I'm not cured by any means. You can't really expect to ever be cured if you have severe anxiety. Depression is part of who you are. You just need to learn how to deal with it. But as someone who has gone through that, I can say that you have a responsibility to go and seek help, and don't just escape from it. So when I was 21, I guess. I think I might have been 21, or just 20 even. And that's when I hit the point where I sort of realized, no, I need to talk to somebody. I remember the moment I was at home with my mother's, and it was dark. But it was the autumn. It might even have been November, December. So, that being dark in Sweden, that doesn't mean anything. It's dark now, but it's not even pitch dark. It's kind of at this point in the year, May, it was the summer, it doesn't get really that dark in Sweden. Then towards December, November, it gets darker around 1 o'clock. But I remember standing there by the window and just looking out in the pitch darkness and just having this moment of feeling absolutely nothing. And just it was the feeling particularly because I felt as if I should be feeling sad now, right? I am a sad person. I know that, but here I am standing here looking out, and I'm just feeling nothing, emptiness, hollowness. So that's a moment where we realized that no, I need actual psychiatric help, and that led to a journey that eventually led to me going through a neuropsychiatric evaluation, which I can talk about that at some point. Maybe stuff comes up along those lines when I answer these questions, but that led to me becoming diagnosed with a handful of diagnoses, including actually Asperger's, but beyond that, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, agoraphobia. I got diagnosed not with the clinic, not with major depressive disorder, but I got diagnosed effectively as I am undergoing depression, and then I got sort of borderline diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorder, which I realize now I do have OCD. I just didn't know when I was going through the evaluation what OCD really meant, so I couldn't really answer the questions about OCD correctly. But I think that I have pretty much OCD. I will refer to myself as having OCD. But before this all becomes too glum and dire, I'm doing relatively okay now. As I said, you're not ever going to be looking for a cure when it comes to severe mental health issues. you're never going to really stop feeling anxiety. And you shouldn't stop feeling anxiety. And the problem with anxiety disorders is not anxiety itself, it's the excess of anxiety, it's the inability to handle your anxiety correctly. And this is what good if you wonder whether or not if you're getting treatments for your anxiety disorders, if you're wondering whether or not the treatment is good and productive or not, if it focuses on removing your anxiety, then it's just a hack fraud trying to teach you something that they don't know anything about. If it's about learning how to handle your anxiety, learning to handle those anxiety spikes, those moments where you're feeling a lot of feeling that sort of bubble up inside of you, knowing how to handle those situations, it's what's most important. But so I've gone through a lot of psychiatry. I gone through a lot of meetings with psychologists. Certainly I got through a lot of meetings with therapists, and I'm sort of quite qualified to talk about this topic from the point of view of having been a patient within it. So I think that would be kind of interesting to talk about, perhaps make some people confront some thoughts and feelings that they just haven't confronted. And you should confront things. Leaving stones unturned, that's not a good thing. You should aim towards understanding yourself. I'm just pushing the microphone a little bit closer to my hairy face. And this is such a good opportunity to introduce my webcam, introduce my face. Hello, this is me. Is it me you're looking for? No, I want challenge the fates with singing copyrighted songs. But yeah, so we're gonna look at this, because why not? This is the Q&A for this week. I want to do them on Wednesdays, but apparently we did it now on Tuesday, and we've done it before on Thursday, so what does the week even mean now? Do you have any kind of real attachment to the week at this point in time with what's going on, coronavirus and the likes? Of course not. I'm gonna move this page a little bit. There we go. You didn't see that. You didn't see how I moved the page, because you can only see the page. What does mental health mean to you? Is it the same as happiness? Wait, do we jump into the questions straight away? No, the questions are... wait, let me see. Well, okay. The questions start off... we're not going to necessarily read the introduction, because, well, let's just skim through it. What does mental health mean to you? Is it the same as happiness, or simply the absence of mental illness? Yeah, that's a good one, because I've done comics about I did a comic about this last winter in December, because I was feeling this bout of depression at that point, and I just started feeling like it would be great to feel happiness, to feel joy, and I think I got a few responses from people asking me, "Are you feeling okay, Fred?" Because these comics are really dark, and yeah, I mean, it was just that was part. Making art can often be the way to overcome such bouts, such episodes, but the idea was just the idea that I don't feel as if I have the entitlement to happiness that many people do, because I often, whenever I do feel happy, I immediately start doubting it and start doubting myself, and that puts me in a downward spiral. But it is important to point out that no, actually you should probably not think of mental health as just happiness, because you're going to give yourself an impossible goal in many instances. If you intend to be happy all the time, that won't work. You can be mentally healthy all the time, but you can't be happy all the time. The trick is learning to handle your sadness in a good way that doesn't lead to self-destruction. So yeah, it's simply the absence of mental illness. Whether you are a professional therapist or want to help a friend in need, it helps to have some mental health questions up your sleeve. You may not be able to diagnose someone who isn't doing 100%, but with a little insight into their state of mind, you can play a valuable role in supporting them to get help they need. In this article, we cover some mental health questions to ask yourself, your clients, or even your students. Read on to learn more. So this is what the article contains. What are mental health questions? Let's start off with the definition of mental health, or more precisely, what it isn't. In an article, The Mental Health Continuum, From Languishing to Flourishing, positive psychologist Corey Keyes, 2002, is very adamant about not oversimplifying the mental health concept, writing, "Mental health is more than the presence and absence of emotional states." Yeah, I would say that. Recapping the definition of a syndrome from the clinical literature, he then reminds us of the following. I have the window open here. I'm going to close it because it's getting a little cold. Even though, as you can see, I'm furry enough, I should be able to handle the cold. Recapping the definition of syndrome from the clinical literature, he then reminds us of the following. A syndrome is a set of symptoms that occur together. Finally, Keyes argues that we can challenge the idea that syndromes are all about suffering. He argues that we can view mental health through the lens instead as a syndrome of symptoms of an individual's subjective well-being, or a syndrome of symptoms of a positive feeling and positive functioning in life. I think you can get into a bit of an issue with mental health if you get too focused on a good health and bad health, mental health wise, because it's not quite the same as your body. We can kind of know for sure that if you go and eat at McDonald's, that is going to be bad for you. That's going to be unhealthy. But with mental health, like maybe say, take something like gambling. For many people, if you were to sit down to play poker, that would be a bad thing for you, because you would get to perhaps a point of gambling addiction. You would perhaps lose money because you would maybe enable really destructive behaviors in you. But for some people who perhaps don't have those issues, who might have might just find poker playing to be a stress-relieving, fun experience. For them, playing poker would be great fun. So mental health, you can't always paint activities in such, the big rush of this is bad for you, this is good for you, and the way you can do with, say, physical health. The brain, this little thing we have right here, for me is not very little because I have a huge and massive head. But this thing we have right here is complex. So these questions will show you concern for someone who is struggling, open up a dialogue about their mental state, trigger them to reflect their overall well-being, prompt or encourage them to seek out professional help if necessary. We're not going to read the entire article, we're just going to get down to the questions. Have you ever experienced a terrible occurrence that has impacted you significantly? Examples may include, but aren't necessarily limited to, being the victim of armed assault, witnessing a tragedy happen to someone else, surviving a sexual assault, or living through a natural disaster. So basically, this is obviously one of the first questions you should bring up when talking to someone about mental health, and try to figure out, you're feeling a lot of stress and anxiety right now. Was there a point like 5 years ago you survived a murder attempt? And because that's something like you can immediately see where this probably comes from. Even if you had underlying issues before that, if you went through some terrible occurrence like that, there's likely something that in your kind of the matrix of your mind, this kind of cancer growth almost that occurred, that came into existence after this terrible occurrence, and that's something that you can address more directly. The problem that I know is that many times, and this happened more in the past, where people we're told that you can't just feel bad because you're feeling bad. There's got to be some trauma in there. The people became so concerned or so over. I mean, I think maybe if you look back at like the original psychiatrists, they probably had a reason to think that there was trauma behind everything, because most people had suffered trauma in their lives, because it's more recently we're living lives where we don't suffer horrible trauma at most points in our lives as people did in the past, you know, with the wars and the diseases that spread. I mean, we have obviously disease spreading now, but we're not seeing dead people in the streets. We're not seeing people vomit to the death just in the back alley. Right now we're living quite comfortable lives, and that means that a lot of people will suffer quite badly without having reason for it, without having explanation for it. And that can often lead to a lot of like stress in that, because you start feeling shame over the fact that you are feeling bad. Why am I feeling all these negative emotions? Why should I feel negative emotions? Am I ungrateful for my life it being good? This happens with a lot of people who think that they can solve all of their issues via success in life, via making it in the career, making it with a partner or whatever, and they get to the point where they start feeling like, I'm still feeling bad. Nothing terrible has happened to me. I'm actually very privileged in my life. I'm married with a beautiful spouse. I have a job that does wonders for me and that I like doing, and I have a kid on the way, and yet I'm still feeling miserable. And somehow you manage to actually take that negativity and turn it on yourself, when you should just be patient with yourself and realize that maybe you have some more underlying issues that might need addressing, you know, that way. But of course, if you have suffered trauma, then it's very important that you go actually address it rather than bottle it up. And yeah, absolutely many people, professional people, who can help you deal with that. I remember having I don't know how much I would want to talk about this person, but I had a girlfriend who suffered trauma, and she was close at some points to tell me about the trauma she had suffered, but she couldn't bring herself to tell me about that, so she never did. And we're not together anymore, and I don't even know how to contact her. But I do think about her quite a bit. Do you ever feel as if you've been affected by feeling of edginess, anxiety, and nerves? I think that would be a fairly obvious one. I mean, I think most people would agree that they've been affected by feelings of edginess, anxiety, and nerves. I think the most the important part there is, have you ever felt like you have been actively like crippled in your personal life from these things, or have it just been like, well, I had to do a test once at school, a really important test, and I was very nervous and anxious about that. Well, of course you would be anxious and nervous about that, but have you at some point, say, when you were baking cookies for your friends and family because you were going to go to, well, I don't know, you were going to get together with your church mates, the people at the church, and you were going to celebrate Easter, and you were baking cakes for the Easter celebrations, and you felt unnecessarily anxious about that. And no one, in a situation where if something goes wrong in that situation, no one will judge you, particularly unless maybe some mean church ladies, but unlike the test that you were nervous about taking because it could literally determine the rest of your life, that thing wouldn't happen with the cakes at the church. It was just, you could explain to people, oh, I accidentally did something wrong with the baking process, so the cakes didn't turn out that well. The church people and your friends, family, they would understand that and go, oh, that's a shame. So you have no reason to feel like overwhelming anxiety about that. But if you do feel overwhelming anxiety about that, that might indicate that there's actually some kind of something out of balance in your head. Have you experienced a week or longer of lower than usual interest in activities that you usually enjoy. Examples might include work, exercise, or hobbies. So yeah, this is a good one, because when you suddenly start feeling like, if you ever been in a situation where you have this activity, this hobby that you keep returning to because you know it always engages you and always makes you feel more alive. If you get into the point, and if you get to a point where you feel like you have like this hollowness inside of you, this hole inside of you that you want to be able to fill, so you go to the hobby that you have, the activity that you love to do, and it always makes you feel so much more alive. Playing a video game, for instance, and then there you are playing video game, you're playing World of Warcraft or League of Legends or Heroes of New Earth, and you're playing your game, and typically it engages you and makes you feel fulfilled. But now you just don't want to do it. It just feels like ash to you. That can often be a very strong symptom of some depressive symptom. Absolutely, I felt that personally quite a few times, where I just want to do nothing, because even things that engages me normally does not engage me at that moment. If I were to say listen to music, I would just hate the music because it would just bother me, give me a headache. Have you experienced an attack of fear, anxiety, or panic? So this is, as I talked about earlier, actually, even if you don't feel panic attacks specifically, you might feel a sudden bubbling up of anxiety, and that's something that also should be noted. Like, anxiety at its core is like it's a unsteady sea, some a restless sea that's always bubbling over, always going back and forth. At some point you have tide, some point you have no tide, at some point you feel as if it's more violent than usual, sometimes it's calmer than usual. This is how anxiety works, and that is also why you should be going around, if you're feeling calm, you shouldn't be going around like worrying about the next instant, because that's often times what ruins those positive moments for people with severe mental health issues. But you should have a sense of like, this will come and go. To me, when I was going through a lot of my issues, this is when I discovered George Harrison's solo career for the first time, and I listened to All Things Must Pass, and I related so much to the lyrics in that, and it kind of introduced me to this. There's been a conventional sort of narrative in much of spirituality throughout the ages, talking about how the fleetingness of things, that yes, it's sad that we're all going to die at one point, and we're going to lose a life, that we're going to lose our good relationships, we're going to lose our parents, things like that. It's a shame that must pass, but it can also be a great deal of comfort knowing that this bad stink that I am in right now, it too will pass. So, and also, if you particularly have a lot of issues with your mood, if you have a mood disorder, it's always very good to take note, like keep a diary or something where you write down, today I felt extra moody, extra sad, today I felt better. It's always good to have that sort of journal to keep, and always remind yourself that no, because in those worst moments, you will always feel like, I'm always going to feel like this. This is always how I am going to be like. This is what I'm going to feel like always. If you just take the moment to realize, no, actually, yesterday I felt quite okay, that's going to immediately bring you back. The safe harbor. The feelings of anxiety or discomfort around others bother you. This is actually a very good question, because I think that you can immediately tell a lot about whether or not the person handles their anxiety in a positive way, depending on whether or not they want to flee away from others, or they want to kind of stay around and talk about the feelings. As something that I particularly felt with my anxiety is that fight or flight reaction, and you can't fight your anxiety. I mean, it would be great if you could summon your anxiety into sort of personified, fleshy little weakling that you could punch down, but you can't. I mean, anxiety is in here. It's like a cloud over your head, and you can't fight it away. So your response will end up just being to flee, to run away, to get to your little hollow, like you're a sort of animal, like you're a rabbit running away. And that can often be a sign that your anxiety is so extreme that you don't know how else to address it. If you're feeling anxiety but you still feel like you can actually talk to other people about it, that might be a sign that you haven't gone quite so far off the deep end. This is quite a good question so far. But I should be note, of course, that I'm coming at this from the point of view of being someone who has suffered a lot of, has been a patient throughout a lot of my life, not as someone who is educated to talk about these issues. Really, I'm just talking at it from the point of view of someone with experience of it. I know that I got an email, but I'm not going to open it while we're doing this, because this is fun, isn't it? No, but if there's just one person who will watch this and think, well, Fred actually learned something from this, actually gained something from this, it's worth it. That sounds sappy, but it's true. Tell me about your sleeping habits over the past X months. Have you noticed any have you noticed any changes? Difficulty sleeping, restlessness. How about the quality of sleep? So yeah, if you sleep too little, that's a big problem if you have some mental health issues as well, because sleeplessness, lack of sleep, makes everything worse. Sleep is very important. But also in a weird way, sleeping too much can be a bit of a problem. So it's not just about insomnia, though insomnia can obviously is, I think, the more bigger problem than people sleeping too much. But if you sleep too much and if you always feel tired all the time, then that might imply that you perhaps are being too overcome with anxiety, obsessions about thinking all the time, being active all the time, having your mind be active all the time, so you exhaust yourself all the time, and that obviously can be just as much a problem. So being able to maintain a healthy kind of sleep schedule is very important. I do have a healthy sleep schedule, even though I tend to get to bed too late and sleep too long into the day, but I do sleep alright. I have quite wild dreams, but that is quite common if you are, if you have active imagination and anxiety at the same time. My brain can go into places, and I will turn and twist in my bed a lot. My bed looks like battlefield anytime I wake up, but I am aware that I'm getting the amount of sleep that I need, because I'm not waking up and I'm feeling like a wreck. I'm waking up and I still feel like I want to stay in bed all the time, but I'm waking up and I kind of realize that actually I do feel refreshed from this. How would you describe your appetite? Eating habits is also a good one. I have always had terrible eating habits, in that I don't eat like regularly throughout the day, and I can't force myself to do that. It just goes against my nature. But certainly if you feel, as some people I know who have had severe mental health issues, they never eat. And it's like, I'm just here in the sort of corner. I'm just trying to encourage them to please go and eat something. Go eat a sandwich, something. And they say, well, when was the last time you ate something? Oh, last week. Go eat something now, please. I love you. Go eat. It's very important too. If not, when you're feeling like really gripped with mental health, mental issues, particularly if you have had, suicidal ideation in the past, obviously, taking care of your own body is not going to be your main concern. But if you just perhaps say feeling manic a lot, and you're just kind of forgetting about eating because you can't be bothered to sit down and eat something, eat an egg. You just want to do something else. You want to experiment with your toolkits. You don't want to eat right now. You want to do something more exciting. You want to go on an adventure. If you're feeling like that, try to calm yourself a little bit. Calm yourself down a little bit and just go and eat an egg. It's always a good thing to do. Could you tell me about any times over the past few months that you've been bothered by low feelings, stress, or sadness? So yeah, feeling sad isn't a problem. If you are at that point where you feel sad and you're crying, say, and you're getting like impatient with yourself, starting to feel like, well, I can't believe I'm feeling sad again. I'm such a bitch. You start feeling along those lines, like you are in some ways pathetic for crying, or that you shouldn't be crying. You shouldn't have these emotions at all. That is when it certainly gets into a more problematic area, because then you clearly don't have a healthy relationship towards your own feelings of sadness. If you're able to feel sad, say if you're able to watch a movie and feel sad about some event that happens in the movie, that's only a good thing, because it shows that you have, obviously a lot of empathy and you can engage yourself with the outside world still. You don't have that wall cutting you off. But if you say, as sometimes happened in my life, where I would just be at my worst with depression, and I would just break down and feel myself wanting to cry and do nothing but crying, and I couldn't really explain why, other than I just generally felt quite miserable at those times. That obviously becomes a problem, and a problem we should address. How frequently have you had little pleasure or interest in the activities you usually enjoy? That's pretty much the same question as before. So, yeah, if you start feeling like you're numb towards things you generally like, you like to go out bicycling a lot and suddenly you hate going out bicycling, or well, not really hate, but you start feeling nothing about it. You start feeling like this doesn't fascinate me at all. Like how I would feel going out bicycling, where wouldn't be my favorite activity in the least. So if that's how you suddenly start feeling about that, and that's obviously going to be an indication of something. Autonomy, choice, and control. Pride, dignity, privacy. How often during the past X months have you felt as though your moods, your life were under your control? So this is a good one, obviously, because moods is something that most of us would say that when do we actually control our own moods? When do we actually decide when we're feeling happy, when we're feeling sad, when we're feeling angry? Because obviously we're all being provoked by our surroundings, our environment. Those are the sort of those are the things that kind of determine our feelings at the time. But if you feel as if you are particularly like exasperated over just how extreme those reactions are, to the point where you feel like you're kind of losing yourself in your emotions are taking over, you are now less of a person and more of a vehicle for your own emotions, that would be a good example of maybe your moods are in fact overtuned. How frequently have you been bothered by not being able to stop your worrying? So yeah, that's also a good one, because particularly that's the thing, like when sometimes you're gripped by anxiety, some people will tell you, well, you stop worrying about it, go on a walk, take a break, and it will feel better. And of course that's horrible advice if you have anxiety disorders, and it's because you can't just stop worrying. But generally, if you're a more mentally healthy person, yes, you can actually kind of just stop worrying. You can stop thinking about it. You can do something else. You can distract yourself. If you're feeling like your anxiety is, again, like with the mood, if you're feeling like you're more of a sort of emotion, more of a vehicle for your extreme moods, than a person, or if you feel like you're more of a vehicle for your extreme anxiety more than you are a person, that's going to be an indicator of something. And that's something that I've seen a lot of people with anxieties, myself included, have often tried to express this feeling of, I used to think about this, I used to put it like I am more anxiety than I am man at this point. Like I felt as if that the anxieties were like more of a definition of me as a person. If I were to define myself as a person, I would have to let the anxiety define me, because the anxiety was me at that point. It controlled my life. Now I happily don't feel quite the same. I feel as if I do have some control of my anxiety. Actually, my anxiety has taken the back seat where it belongs. My anxiety is hidden there underneath my bed. I don't let it out. I keep it there under my bed as a prison. Self-perception. Tell me about how confident you have been feeling in your capabilities recently. So your confidence is a tricky one, because of course having too much confidence is obviously going to be a sign of narcissism and all that. And it can be very tempting sometimes to say that, hey, you overly confident people, stop being so confident, start self-doubting. But obviously having confidence is great. You should be confident about things, and perhaps actually be a bit overconfident in some things. Otherwise you won't really put yourself out there. I mean, I would never dare to even try to be a cartoonist if I didn't think that I perhaps were more funny, had more humor in me than perhaps other people. If I didn't have some overconfidence in that, I wouldn't be able to do this thing that satisfies me greatly and provides me with good in my life. And if you feel like the same about, if your big hobby is singing, and you may worry about perhaps you are overconfident in your singing voice, perhaps your singing voice isn't that great, perhaps you're overconfident in that. Well, maybe, but if it's going to be what's going to get you to go out there and take those risks and start a career in singing, that obviously you need that confidence, you need that overconfidence. Obviously, as long as it doesn't turn into narcissism, like when you start getting angry at people who tell you, even the slightest bit of criticism, that confidence will be needed. Let's talk about how often you have felt satisfied with yourself over the past 6 months. Something that does interest me, and this is not a direct answer to this question, but oftentimes one of the things about depression that people may or may not know is that when you're depressed, and I remember reading a study about this, an article about this some time ago, and it kind of put some wheels going in my head, that actually depressed people, when they are made to evaluate their own skills, actually are oftentimes more realistic than non-depressed people at evaluating their own skills, because people, when they're healthy, tend to overvalue their own skill set than depressed people. But I think depressed people certainly also do undervalue their own fitfulness at life. It's not, but when you are depressed, you certainly feel as if you are seeing the truth. That you know the truth, that you have the truth revealed to you, that the world that you're seeing at this moment, that's the real world, and it's all those happy people that are fraudulent, that are seeing it wrong. And you can certainly see this a lot in a lot of pop culture, a lot of music that perhaps appeals to teenager will often take that stand that no, it's actually us miserable folks, or us freaks, we are the ones who are real. All those happy people, all those smiling people, all those Chads and Stacys, they are wrong. I mean, this is the nature of the incel community and all else online. They are all convinced that they are right, that they see the truth that everyone else don't see, and this is why so many internet communities go on about red pill and black pill and all that, because they want to convince themselves that the normies, they don't know the truth, they don't see the real world that I see. But then you kind of have to realize that maybe they do. Maybe they see the real world, and maybe the fact that they are happy doesn't mean that they're deluded. maybe the fact that you're sad means that you're deluded. And you need to break your way out of that thought pattern. That thought pattern of rewarding yourself for getting worse, rewarding yourself for seeing things worse, for looking at the world through a harsher and harsher lens. Oftentimes, something that is not often discussed is how depression goes hand in hand with cynicism. To me, depression always expresses itself in extreme cynicism. I would often feel like, look at those other people not being depressed. They are so wrong. Don't they know that depression, the state I am in, is the right state? I see the world clearly. They are all deluded. And I just want to go back and slap myself for that. But that's often how, depression wants to keep you in the depression. It doesn't want you to improve. It wants to keep you in depression by just putting yourself in the mental scape of just only seeing things in terms of how does these things now relate to your negative feelings, your depression that you're feeling right now. Hope and hopelessness. How often I felt as though the future was bleak over the past few weeks. So yes, this is a relevant one for what's going on today. Something though that fascinates me, as much as I will see some people I will see go on about how miserable the world is right now with the coronavirus, with global warming, with tensions, with rise of far right populism. And yet I will see them talking about how they're looking forward to having children, or starting a family, and how they're looking forward to seeing that new movie that's about to come out. And to some extent, knowing my own depressed self, I will see that and I will go, how can you even smile knowing what's going on? But that's also a sign of having, it's absolutely fine and fair to worry about the state of the world as it is right now, and to worry about the future, and also to not entirely give yourself into the idea that the future is bleak and it can't be changed. Because oftentimes, the truth is that the future is probably not going to be as rosy as we all would want it to be. We're probably not going to get the Star Trek future, but we're also not going to get the Warhammer 40k future. There can actually be a middle point. And that is something that is very good to aim towards, to try and figure out that, yes, throughout much of history, things have gone forwards, and perhaps never quite as speedily as we would hope, but things have been going forwards. And just realize, I'm gonna have to need some drink. Sorry. I suddenly felt like you get this little feeling of being stabbed in your own throat because you keep talking even though you need some lubrication for your throat. I don't know if that made any sense. Can you tell me about your hopes and dreams for the future? What feelings have you had recently about working towards those goals? So yeah, I would always advise people to stop having huge goals for the future and start thinking more in terms of what do you want to do tomorrow? I kind of hate the idea of people giving themselves things that they have to do within this year. I know some people, particularly my age, women my age, feel as if I need to start families soon because I'm about to hit my 30s, or I'm in my 30s, I'm in my early 30s, and now I need to form a family. This year I'm going to find my new husband. Not my new husband, my first husband, and hopefully not someone I need to divorce from, hopefully my one and only husband. And they will have these kind of rules, this structure for how their life must go on. My cousin had that when she was just a little girl. I remember an instance where my cousin, my sister and I, and my dad and my mom, we were on a car trip to the mountains, the fells in Sweden, for a skiing trip. And in the car, my cousin was telling my mother and all of us in the car about how she had all these plans for when I turned this age, 20. I guess she said when I would turn 22, I will find my husband. When I turn 24, we will marry each other. When I turn 25, I will have one child. And 26, I will have the other child. And 27, I will have the other child. And then we will get a dog and we will have a house. All these rules very structured in the way that kids can often do it. And I mean, that's fine, she was a kid and she didn't follow those rules exactly, but she does have a husband now and she does have a kid and a second kid on the way. But as soon as you start like giving yourself these goals that you need to fulfill, and if you don't fulfill them, you're useless, you're hopeless, you failed, that's obviously not going to be a good thing for you. If you instead start thinking about, the near future, what do you want to do tomorrow? How is there anything you want to do tomorrow that that you can easily do, and you feel as if it will bring you some sort of satisfaction? Then those are the sort of goals and hopes you should maintain and continue on with. So I used to very much when I was a teenager, used to have these ideas of where I want to be as a creator in the future. And right now I'm just thinking, well, what can I do tomorrow? And then I will eventually build up things like, I just decided one day, okay, I'm going to stream. And now streams are something I do not every day. I'm not really interested in doing it every day. But I have been doing streams and I've been keeping it up. And I've been slowly improving enough. Like, look at me! Ah! I'm on a webcam! I'm like a professional. No, I'm not. I don't have a green screen. Relationship and belonging. Describe how supported you feel by others around you, your friends, family, or otherwise. So this is a good one, certainly for some people. I mean, this can be a very tricky one because there's some people who don't get any support. And I'm lucky in that I have support from my family, and my mother in particular were very supportive of me, mostly because my mother and I pretty much share the same issues with anxiety. Kind of proof, as far as I see it, that anxiety and mental health issues often have a genetic component, because I certainly must have gotten some anxiety genetically from my mother, and I don't think that was just to happen of my mother spreading her anxiety to us during childhood. Her the way she raised us, the way she behaved around us, imprinted her anxiety in us. Some people may make that argument, but I think that there is a genetic component, and we certainly see that with a lot of diagnosis. A lot of times when people get diagnosis, they can have an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent that they never met that had the same diagnosis. Anyway, but you're still lucky if you do have your family that does support you and does let you have support. If you don't have support, I mean, obviously, to many people, they feel that support group from their friends. And this is one of the things that internet has always done good and bad for mental health, and how it has exacerbated mental illness in some cases in the world today. But it has also brought a lot of people communities that they otherwise wouldn't have. I certainly know that from my time studying perhaps some more unusual subcultures online. I'd like to read about what these communities go through, and I've certainly seen a lot of times people express just this sense of hopelessness before they found this subculture, that they felt for the first time like they have people around them that truly understands them. And there's something very valuable in that. And if you're someone who feels as if you've always had that community, but now you can't take solace in that, that certainly can indicate that you're kind of disassociating from reality, from the network that you have. Let's discuss how you've been feeling about your relationships recently. No. Let's not talk about my relationships. They are private. Mostly because there's so many of them. I get exhausted. Oh, you should see me after I've been with my girls. I'm all red all over. worn down. Snoo. Tell me about any important activities or projects that you've been involved with recently. How much enjoyment do you get from these? So yeah, this is something that I think is very good and important. I remember talking to a psychiatrist once. He's not my psychiatrist now, but he was my psychiatrist then. And we started talking about how you identify yourself, how you come to identify yourself based on what you do, often as your job, and how dangerous that can be. We were talking not really because of myself in that moment, it was just a conversation we got into. We were talking about how people, I knew and so on, that they would so very much identify themselves based on, I'm a journalist, I write, that's what I do. Then I spend all the time writing, 24/7, writing, and their job is what they want to do and what they love to do. And yes, obviously it's great to have a passion like that, but the problem you have is that when you eventually get to, say, your retiring age, and you're no longer a journalist, what are you then? What is your identity at that point? Because you have completely lost that. And you could lose that in other ways. Maybe, let's say you went blind and you couldn't write anymore. You could obviously learn to pick up one of those keyboards. Or you could dictate. I guess, it's more like if you had a stroke, let's say, and you completely lost the ability to communicate. You're at that point, having identified having put all your eggs in one basket, it's put it, you feel as if you have nothing. It's always good to diversify a little bit, to not just have one thing that defines you. And at that point, my psychiatrist was very much, agreeing with me. He was he was talking about how brilliant you are, Fred. Fred, I don't need to talk to you like a psychiatrist. I can talk to you as a colleague. You're so brilliant, Fred. I'm impressed. I'm amazed. But no, but my psychiatrist did talk at that point. He mentioned that, yes, I spend a lot of my time with psychiatry, obviously. I go to conferences, I go to lectures. It's a big part of my life. But another big part of my life, the part of my life that I'm actually identify with more, that I enjoy more, is my cat breeding. I breed cats. I raise cats and kittens and sell them to good people. And that was a fun instance because he was kind of a big guy with bald head. He kind of looked like he made me think of the guy from Breaking Bad, the brother-in-law. He looked like that, and then started talking about my cats, my kittens. And it's like with Breaking Bad with the rock collections. They're not rocks, they're... What's the line? I can't remember the line. I know it's a meme, but I can't remember the line at the moment. But it's always good to have that kind of diversification. And certainly I would feel very upset and distraught if I couldn't draw anymore. But I also know that there are other things in my life that defines me. For instance, if I couldn't draw anymore, I would probably look into, talking to people, perhaps getting a job in counseling or something like that. And I wouldn't be a psychiatrist, but I would probably try to identify myself as that, a communicator, someone who helps people. So it's always good to have that sense of like there's some other avenue for you. How frequently have you been doing things that mean something to you or your life? So yeah, I mean, you want things to live for. You want projects, big projects to go for. But you also want to diversify a little bit, to have a feeling that there are more than just one thing keeping you on. That if you suddenly lost your ability to do that one thing, you can still always do something else. I mean, if I were to lose the ability to make art, I would still be able to talk about art, look at art. I would go back to school to finish my degree in art history and become, some obnoxious pheasant at the museum, insisting on, hey, do you want me to talk to you about these paintings you see right here? Do you want me to tell you about how brilliant they are? And because you are some sort of plebe who don't appreciate this art perfectly, let me tell you why you should love this art. Yeah, this seems to have been all the questions. There are more questions, more articles here, but this was, to me, a bit of a good chat to have. Talking about something that many people don't talk about. And as I said, if there's only just one person who will take some sort of comfort from this, then that would be a great thing.